Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Bethanne, so hi. Today is New Year's Eve. I normally post on Thursdays, but since today's New Year's Eve, that didn't really happen. So I'm taking a quick few minutes as my spouse is putting our 3-year-old to bed to film this, and I'm going to put it up on Friday morning, New Year's Day. So by the time everybody will have seen this, Happy New Year, regardless of what time zone you're in. I think it will be Happy New Year. Can only go up from 2020, right? We've got vaccines for coronavirus, so yay! So I hope everybody who celebrates the new year was able to do so safely and with some community. So I hope that was a nice holiday for everyone. So, okay, all that said, I wanted to just do a quick December wrap-up for now. I ended up doing a lot more tags and reading goals and things like that than I normally do for December, so I didn't do a lot of updates on what I'm reading, so I actually have a lot to update on, I think. So just to start with some quick stats. So in December, I read 11 books, which is awesome for me, so I'm really happy with that. 2 of them were physical books that I own. There was 1 Kindle book that I own because I bought it for Kindle, and then there were 8 library books, and I think of those 8 library books, I think I read 1 on my Kindle, but it was a library ebook loan, and that was for a total of 3,196 pages, almost 3,200 pages, which sounds like a lot to me. So, okay, so I kind of broke it up by genre, so let's go through. I'm going to start with nonfiction, because I read some really great nonfiction. So I had 3 nonfiction books. I had 2, okay. So I had 2 physical nonfiction books that I either own or still have from the library, and then I had 1 that I already had to turn into the library because other people had it on hold. So the one that I already had to turn in, I'll put a picture up wherever that shows up, was Dancing at the Pity Party by Tyler Fetter, which is a graphic novel, but it's actually a graphic memoir. And it's the author's mother died, I think, when she was 19. She was in college. She was a sophomore in college. And she wrote the memoir when she was in her early 30s, and it's looking back on describing the sequence of events around her mother getting sick and dying. And it was just a beautiful book. I think the graphic novel form was really, really impactful for that sort of storytelling, because she was able to bring in some of the like day-to-day humor of her particular family gathering around, some of the quirky particular things that the people in her family did to deal with grief and death, but then also delivered this incredibly moving message about moving through the death of a loved one. So that was really powerful and really beautifully done. I really encourage you to check it out if you get a chance. And then the other 2 nonfictions that I read, and I should say all 3 of these nonfiction books were 5-star books for me. These were fantastic. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. I'm an ecologist, so this was just like speaking my language. I obviously have no Indigenous background, so in terms of that, it wasn't speaking my language, but in terms of feeling a connection to the land, feeling a connection to nature, and trying to cultivate that and trying to interpret it as a language in a way that the nature is speaking, and from my background, coming at it from a scientific perspective and trying to figure out what nature is telling me. That's what this whole book is about, and it's really, really powerful. So Dr. Kimmerer is not only Indigenous, she's also a practicing scientist trained in European American scientific ways, and so she kind of braids those 2 trains of thought together, talking about these different ways that we can understand nature, we can get to know nature, we can take lessons away from nature, and really importantly, in the last section of the book, how we can be better stewards for nature and for the natural world. And for me, that has a strong impact, thinking of myself as a steward for future generations. As a parent and as somebody who's really enjoyed the natural world for myself, both professionally and personally, as a place where I recreate and spend my spare time. You know, I want everybody to have that resource and to really enjoy that and connect with it in the way that I have. So this book was just astoundingly beautiful nature writing, and really impactful messages as well. A lot of people around BookTube have read this book around the same time frame that I have in 2020 and reviewed it really well, so I'll try to link to some of those that I really like. Some ones that stand out in my head of people who've talked about this book really well are Heidi from My Reading Life and Doris from Aldi Books. Yeah, just encourage you to go look at some other BookTube channels about this. But yeah, 5-star book, nature writing. Absolutely loved it. Then another nonfiction book, the third one that I'm going to talk about, third and final, is Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein. And I picked this up because Courtney Ferreter read it, and link to her below in the description. And this is just about describing the current political system in America. So this book came out in 2020, and as anybody who's an American and probably anybody international knows, because the US tends to dominate things, which is a little stupid. We're not that, I mean, we are that important, but we shouldn't be that important. I don't know. Oh gosh, we're terrible. Yeah, it's just exploring how the US political system got so polarized. We're talking about the left versus the right. So a lot of it is kind of historical and contemporary, about looking at the forces that drive that. And then he ends with some kind of broad recommendations for how we can maybe try to start dealing with that. Nothing super surprising in this, I would say, but it was incredibly well written, very accessible. Ezra Klein, who wrote this, is one of the co-founders of Vox, the, I want to say political news website, because I read it for a lot of political news, but it's basically very thoughtful news, very thoughtful journalism on any topic. So if you're familiar with Vox, this was a fantastic book to read. Okay, so moving on from, oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, okay, Dancing at the Pity Party, to show the picture again. That was something that I saw reviewed by Jen at Remembered Reads, and she made it sound really good as well. So if you're not convinced by the vague stuff that I said about it, you can go watch her video about it, which I've linked to in the description below. Okay, so those are my nonfiction books. So then for fantasy, I read 2 books. I read 1 5-star book and 1 3-star book. So the 5-star book is The Deep by Rivers Solomon, which I posted a separate review of, so that should maybe be in the cards. And this is kind of a mythical retelling, kind of imagining, you know, if the world weren't what it is, what might have happened to African women who were being brought across the Atlantic as slaves in slave boats and were thrown overboard either in the very late stages of pregnancy or while they were in labor. So what might have happened to those babies? Reimagining, instead of the absolutely tragic, gut-wrenching, historical thing that happened, what if the babies could somehow have been transformed into mythical mermaid-like creatures and established their own culture under the sea? This book was absolutely fantastic. To me, it was in the vein of Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote The Water Dancer, which I believe came out in early 2020, because I read it earlier this year, and I think I read it new, or late 2019. But in that book, Coates is imbuing the Underground Railroad and the escape from slavery with magical power. So in that book, Harriet Tubman has a magical power that can help hide people from slavery and help transport them from the southern states and the slave regions into the free North. And so I just really like the power of that, of kind of recasting a tragic history into a mythical narrative. I think that's really powerful. I think it's claiming power. And The Deep is in that vein. So I'm, like I said, in the cards, my review of it. I'm also going to link below to Nell at Gunfiction, Powder, and Plot, who I think did a really fantastic review of it, and she delves more into the musical background of this story, because there's actually 2 musical groups that have really developed kind of this mythic story, and then Rivers Solomon put it to words in a novella. So I'm linking to Nell's review as well, which is a lot more information about that. So that was the first of 2 fantasy books. Then the other was my 3-star fantasy book. So I'm putting the picture up wherever it shows up. That was called The Price of Faith by Rob J. Hayes, excuse me, which is a self-published book, and that was the third in a trilogy. The trilogy is called The Ties That Bind, and I did do a full review of the first book in that series, The Heresy Within, so I might be linking to that either in the cards or down below. And then in November, I read the second book, The Color of Vengeance. So I will say the third book of this trilogy, The Price of Faith, was actually decent. Like I said, it was a 3-star book for me. It was really interesting. And the thing I keep saying about this series is the characters were kind of compelling. Like they're anti-hero types. It's a dark, grimdark fantasy. And so the heroes are not what you typically expect in fantasy. Like they're not really great people. They're criminals. But you know, they're criminals because they have to be, the world is against them, you know, there's a whole setup, and it really makes sense. And so the criminals are the heroes, they're anti-heroes, and there's nothing wrong with that. The one thing that has really gotten me about this series, and I said it in my review about the first book, and this is absolutely true of the second book, is that Hayes sets up like an overarching narrative, an overarching conflict, and then it's really kind of a backstory. Like the front and center is the day-to-day lives of the characters. They kind of go off on a lot of side quests, basically. That overarching theme is just not really engaged with. And that was really frustrating for me as a reader, because I'm not opposed to a book that just really builds up the characters and is character driven, and where they just kind of go on quests and things are just kind of happening and it's okay. But in the very beginning of the first book, like, he does kind of set up an overarching story and then just refuses to engage with it. And so that was the thing that was really frustrating for me. Like in the second book, The Color of Vengeance, he doesn't engage with that overarching theme until 60% of the way into the book. I was reading it on my Kindle, so I got the percentages. It was 60% of the way into the second book before he even mentioned the overarching plot. Okay, the third book was good. He dealt with the overarching plot well, things were wrapped up. Again, like I said, the characters were compelling. So I almost feel like it could have been a 2-book trilogy, and I would have liked it a lot more. That said, you know, I think overall my average was like 3 stars. I think I gave one of the books 2.5 stars. So they're good if you like grimdark fantasy. You know, they might be worth reading. But they weren't, you know, they weren't Game of Thrones or whatever. They weren't absolutely astounding. So I think that's all I have to say about that. Okay, so next genre, I read a bunch of romance books. I read 3 romance books. So I have 2 of them here. These are both library books, and then the first one in the series, these are actually number 2 and number 3. The first one in the series was a library ebook that I read on my Kindle. So I've already done a review actually of the third book in the series, Christmas at Little Beech Street Bakery by Jenny Colgan, which I read first, so I'll link to that in the cards. And if anybody watched my review of this book first, you might remember that one of my main beefs with this book was that there was a secondary character that the author really just like told us about and didn't show. So what she showed of that character was that he was awful. He was abrasive, he was sexist, he was kind of mean, I did not like him. And the author would just tell us like, oh, but he's a sweetheart, you know, he's kind of funny. And so I was like, I do not get it. Like, that's not good writing. Like, oh my gosh. So that's what made me mark this book. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, which on Goodreads I round up to 4. But yeah, 3.5 stars just because of that character. The rest of the story was amazing. I loved the main characters. I loved the love story. I loved some of the other secondary characters. I loved the plot. But like that writing of this secondary character that played a major role was so frustrating to me. So having said that, I did go back and read the first and second books of the series. So this is the second book, Summer at Little Beech Street Bakery, and the first book is just Little Beech Street Bakery. And in the first and second books, that secondary character that I had so much of an issue with is actually written really well. Like, you really understand how abrasive and obnoxious he can be at first glance, but how it really hides a heart of gold, and he's actually just a sweetheart with no social skills, I guess, which, not really excusing that, I guess. I mean, I think we all need to develop some sort of social skills, but he's a redemptive character. Like, he's a beautiful person. He really helps out the hero and the heroine quite a bit. So I think if I'd read the first 2 books first, as the author intended, I guess, I might have actually rated this Christmas at Little Beech Street Bakery higher. So number 1 and number 2 were both genuine 4-star books for me. These are just genuinely enjoyable romances. I maybe should have mentioned, so these take place in Cornwall in England, and they take place in a little island just off the coast of Cornwall that's connected at low tide via a causeway to the mainland. And so there's a lot going on. There's a lot about kind of insider-outsider culture. There's a lot about like old-timey fishing village versus modernity culture. And our main heroine, Polly, is someone who's escaped to this tidal island following a really bad breakup with a long-term partner with whom she had a business. The business went bankrupt, and she's really starting from scratch as a bankrupt person on this island, just really trying to get away. And thankfully, she finds, if not financial success, at least financial stability, and she finds happiness and love in this tiny island community. And it's just a beautiful story. I absolutely loved it. I was in love with this heroine. The series does continue, but I think I'm probably not going to continue it because the fourth book in the series doesn't follow the same main character. It follows a new main character. And I am interested in checking out more of the author Jenny Colgan's work, but right now I would really just want to keep reading about Polly, the main character in these books. I don't really want to switch yet. So maybe in the future I'll check out more of Jenny Colgan because, like I said, these are 4-star books for me. Like, that's good. So definitely worth checking out. These were cute and fun. Okay, I am, oh my gosh, talking a lot about different books. Oh yeah, and one other thing about this actually was that the details about the main character kind of change, which is totally the author's prerogative. Like, that's fine. I totally get that series kind of develop and can take on a life of their own, especially when they're a light kind of chick lit romance series. But so, for example, in the first 2 books, Polly has a lot of emotional baggage from her long-term partnership where she had the business that went bankrupt, but it sounds like she comes from a stable family life. And then in the 3rd book, Christmas at Little Beach Street Bakery, a lot of the romantic tension actually comes from Polly's lack of stable family life growing up. So in this book, a really, really key piece is that her father totally disappeared before she was even born, and she's never met him. And she's an only child with no siblings. Her mom totally sacrificed to raise her, etc., etc. And that's a key driving point for Christmas at Little Beach Street Bakery. And in the first 2 books, it's actually mentioned pretty explicitly that Polly actually did have a father who was around and introduced her to her favorite books when she was a little kid, and she has a sister who doesn't show up as a character but is mentioned, I think in the first book actually. But so just if anybody really cares about those sort of details, it would have really bothered me if those had really mattered to the plot and the themes of the first and second book, but they didn't. It's just in the 3rd book when the author changed them and then they really mattered, which could drive you a little bit crazy, but these were still lovely stories. Okay, so that's my romance. Okay, finally, last genre. This is a much longer video than I normally do. So, cookies for everyone if you've stuck through this. So, in the YA category, I have 3 books. 2 of these are library books. One is one that I own. So the first is Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker, which is a pen name for Seanan McGuire. And I already did a full review of this book, so I'll just put that in the cards and not really talk about it. It's fine. The next is You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This book I loved so much. Oh my gosh, it made me cry. It made me so happy. I couldn't put it down at points. This is the book one of the many books I wish I'd had when I was a teenager, I guess. And especially given that it's a debut novel. I mean, I gave this 5 stars. Like, I thought it was fantastic. Like, I almost, having read the whole thing, want to say it could have happened in a little bit shorter space or something, but like, not really, because so much happened and it was so well told. So I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for future novels from Leah Johnson. Just in brief, this follows the story of oh my gosh, Liz Leighty. I was going to say, I'm totally blanking her name. Liz Leighty, who is an outstanding, oh my gosh, clarinetist, I want to say, in the band. Her only dream is to go excuse me, go to college for music. She's been kind of accepted to the college of her choice, but she did not get the music scholarship that she was 100% counting on to pay for school. And so this is not spoilery. This is like the first chapter of the book. She is just thrown into a loop where like her only dream that she's worked for, that her mom worked for, that her grandparents have pushed her for, etc., seems completely out of reach. And another key point of the plot is that her mom is dead from sickle cell disease. And so that's another key thing, is dealing with that. And she realizes that being prom queen at her small town Indiana high school actually comes with a $10,000 scholarship. And so if she can win prom queen, then all of her problems are solved and she can go to the college of her dreams. So it's awkward band nerd trying to make prom queen, and it's just fantastic and heartwarming, and totally recommend. Like I said, 5-star book. for me. And then finally, my final book is a YA graphic novel called Lumberjanes. Beware the Kitten Holy is the version that I have, which is kind of applied to the first 4 issues of this. This was originally, I think, kind of serialized as a webcomic. Yeah, and this is the first 4 issues in a webcomic form. I'll just open a random page because why not? And it's totally cute. So the basic idea is the Lumberjanes, as opposed to like the Lumberjacks, are kind of a alternative Girl Scouts. I mean, they're kind of Girl Scouts, but they're like more fun. And so the book is all about this one cabin of girls. There's 5 of them, the 5 main characters, who are kind of having adventures, breaking camp policies, meeting monsters and mythical creatures. Their camp counselor refuses to believe them. They get kind of in trouble a little bit. And then eventually at the end of the 4th issue, the camp counselor has an encounter as well with some of these monsters and realizes that what they're talking about is real. So I assume going into the next issues that more adventures will ensue. I'm kind of excited to read those. My 3-year-old, turns out, is obsessed with this. Like, we're having to read it like 3 and 4 times a day, and that's like the hard cap. Like, she wants it more, and that's the limit we imposed. Obsessed. So I ordered her own copy of this, and I ordered the next 4 issues, which occur in 1 volume as well. But it's just really cute. The whole emphasis is on kind of the friendship between high school girls, and I think there is kind of a budding romance between 2 of the characters, Mal and Molly, and just, yeah, having adventure and always having each other's back and being totally accepting of each other. So it's just lovely and heartwarming. So yeah, those are the 11 books I've read this month. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I'm really looking forward to 2021. I have a lot of exciting reading coming up. I'll be posting more about that in January because I didn't get around to it in December because I was too busy reading my 11 books that I'm really happy about. So, all right. So with that, Happy New Year, everyone. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. I did hear about this. Wow, I just bonked my computer. It's a little bit late on New Year's Eve and I've had some adult beverages. Anyway, I did hear about this Lumberjanes book, I think, for the first time on Rosie Cockshutt's channel, so I will link her below as well for tipping me onto this. So if anybody's interested in this, I think she did a little bit more of a detailed commentary on it, so you can go check that out. Okay, back to what I was saying. Happy New Year, everyone, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks.